Welcome to another episode of the AlbumReview.net podcast. I'm Greg Potters. Thanks to all you loyal listeners out there for your interaction and feedback. Your feedback is much appreciated and it helps me to always improve. Well, it's been a long time since a rock and frickin' roll.
Does anybody remember last time?
For today's episode number 51, I'm pleased to welcome Clementine Moss. Clem is an author, spiritual counselor, and drummer for the Led Zeppelin Powerhouse, Zepparella. You guys are in for a real treat. In this episode, Clem and I discuss her spiritual counseling and meditation practice, her brilliant rock drumming, her love for John Bonham's drumming style, life on the road as a touring musician, and her recent book, From Bonham to Buddha and Back, The Slow Enlightenment of the Hard Rock Drummer, which was published recently on February 22nd, 2023. I don't know about you guys, but when I meet a woman as sweet and as kind as Clem, and then I find out that she kicks ass on the drums in a rock band, man, that piques my interest and I want to immediately find out what makes her tick. I also include some tracks from her band, Zepparella, throughout this episode so you can hear how killer her drum beats are. All right, a little business. Remember, you can read my reviews and listen to any of my podcast episodes by going to albumreview.net. These episodes can also be heard wherever podcasts are available. Please follow my podcast on your preferred platform so you can get regular updates on new episodes. Also, this is important. If you guys would be so kind as to pop a quick review or rate the podcast, that helps move the needle and get the word out there. So just pause this real quick. Go back, rate the podcast, just real quick, just a teeny little rate. I would greatly appreciate it. In addition to listening, you can read over 50 written reviews at albumreview.net and pick up merchandise from your favorite bands. I also have the bookstore where you can pick up music autobiographies in addition to the many books by published authors that I've had here on the show. Go check it out. When you're visiting albumreview.net, please also be sure to check out the store. I've got a wide variety of items for purchase in the store. You can pick yourself up things such as trucker hats, t-shirts, several of your favorite albums, home sound systems, and books, like I said, that I highly recommend. So, without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Clementine Moss.
I've been good. Oh my gosh, I've been loving the interview about Revolver.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I just love it. Yeah, I'm learning all kinds of stuff about it. And, you know, one cool thing was that suddenly I was driving and I was listening to you, and suddenly I remembered how, like, much sunlight is in my memories of listening to music early in my life,
That is awesome.
and it's so
Yeah.
cool that as somebody who plays in a tribute band, it's like, really, that's what people are experiencing, right? That music brings you back to those moments. And in the Beatles, for some reason, there's just so much light in that music, right?
Yeah. Well, that's
Yeah.
really exactly what I was going for. Just to, give people an opportunity to get out of it whatever they want, right? Or I grew up, I probably said it all in the podcast, but like my mother was a huge Beatles fan.
She saw the Beatles at Shea.
Saw the Beatles at Shea in 66.
Amazing.
Yeah,
Amazing.
She used to talk
Yeah.
about it all the time. And so joining me on the show today is Clementine Moss. Clem is an author, spiritual counselor, and drummer for the Led Zeppelin Powerhouse, Zepparella. Today, Clem and I are going to talk about 12 million things, including her counseling practice, her exceptional rock drumming, her love for John Bonham's drumming style, life on the road as a touring musician, and her recent book, From Bonham to Buddha and Back, The Slow Enlightenment of the Hard Rock Drummer, which was published on February 22nd, 2023, which is only about a month from the date that we're recording this. So that's also my son's birthday, February 22nd. So that's a
Yay.
really special day for me, and I'm assuming for you as well, because it's the launch of your book, the published date. So again, I mentioned it before, but thanks so much for joining me today, Clem.
Thanks so much. This is going to be so much fun. I've been
I
really looking forward to it.
I wanted to talk about your band, your book, and your spiritual side and counseling. But before diving into that, wanted to start with a little background. So I think you mentioned that you live in San Francisco currently.
I live in San Francisco. I've lived here for 22 years, I guess. Yeah.
I think I told you that's my favorite city by far in the U.S.
You
Reminds
you would
me a lot
love
of
it
Boston.
today. Yeah, you would love it today. It's magical. It's so pretty outside.
How's the weather been the last couple of weeks there?
Rainy, 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 rainy,
Yeah,
rainy. Which
right.
in California, it's illegal to complain about rain.
So I'm assuming it's like really green now and lush.
Oh my gosh. We just drove. We last weekend we had shows in San Luis Obispo,
Right.
Paula, which is east of San Diego, and Hollywood. And so we drove down the 101 and it looked like Teletubby land. It was so pretty. Just all of the, usually it's brown, it's been brown for a
Right.
long time. And
Yeah,
oh my
forever.
gosh. And the poppies are going crazy in the desert. I mean, it's magical. Yeah.
Now, so you've been there for, a few decades, but you didn't grow up there, right? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Southern California,
Okay.
in Orange County, and then went to school in Santa Cruz, and
Okay.
then went to New York City lived there for 14 years. So I moved from there to San Francisco.
And when did I think you mentioned that you started drumming either seriously or just in general when you were 27? Is that
Yeah,
is that
I,
right?
mm-hmm.
When did you know that you wanted to be a musician? Like I can actually pinpoint not necessarily the day, but the year when
Oh.
I knew when the bug hit me. Do you remember when it like did it just smack you like a truck and you just knew then, or did it take some time?
Well, I played a bunch of instruments when I was a kid. I played piano for 8 years or so, and
Cool.
tried a bunch of instruments and sang and all this stuff, but I was a writer. I mean, I went to school for writing. I stopped playing music when I was in high school. And then when I moved to New York, I moved to New York to write. And um, I had this feeling that I didn't really have anything to say, that I hadn't
Sure.
lived.
Right.
And and I had my boyfriend at the time was a recording engineer and a musician, and so I had a lot of music around me. And we started a little band where I was singing, and I wasn't a very good singer. That I mean, I wouldn't say I'm a good singer now, but then I was really not good because I was very insecure. Um, and then we lost our drummer one day, and I sat down at the drums, and Greg said, "Hey, here's a couple things you can do," and I kind of did it, and he's like, "Actually, that's not bad." So we went home, and he had some drums at the house and set them up, and I
Wow.
started kind of dabbling in it, and then I was bartending in New York, and this man came in, and I was telling him I was kind of dabbling with the drums, and he said, "Well, here's the number of the best drum teacher in New York City," and gave me the name of Fred Klatz, who's a
Okay.
drum teacher, and I started taking private lessons. Um, and so I don't know when the moment that I thought, um, okay, now this is what I'm going to do, because it seems so
Right.
outlandish. I
Sure.
was 27 and it's like, what, now I'm going to be a drummer? But I just suddenly, when I came home and the drums were there, that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'd never felt that way before with an instrument. It was always like, I gotta practice the piano. It never really drew me like
Yeah.
that. And then I started thinking, well, I don't want to, work at a bar for the rest of my life. And I
Right.
do really want to travel. And if I was a
Sure.
musician, I could travel, and
Right.
and it was like this kind of, I don't know. That's the way my mind works. So
Yeah.
that's, for some lucky, I'm very, very fortunate that I've never really felt a sense of limitation. Like if I wanted to do it, I was just going to do it.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah.
So I can imagine, but what was family like for you growing up? Like, so growing up in Southern California, Orange County, like what was your childhood like?
Yeah, it was very, very suburban. My dad, my parents were wonderful, wonderful parents.
Oh, that's great.
Showed up to every single practice even. I mean, my dad
Yeah.
ended up being the coach of me and my sisters of like all the sports, and they were very supportive. My father actually, at the time, he really didn't want me to have any feeling of limitation at being a female. So he was very
That's amazing.
thought that women in sports, for him, sports was where women could really find their power. And he thought it was really important for young women to play sports.
Yeah.
To be powerful. If I wanted the pink bike, he bought me the green Schwinn. If I wanted the cute shoes, he would buy me the boys' high, Converse. I mean, it was just this thing where he was like trying to get me to be, my own person, I think. And he was a great music lover, like a huge music fan, like your mom, where it was just all day, all the time when he was home was music. So that influenced me.
Do you remember some of the records that he had around the house when you were a kid?
I have them. I
Do
have
you
them
really?
because he passed away when he was 54, and I'm the one who inherited the album. So
Ah,
I have all of these. They're all ripped up. They're not worth anything except for me.
sure.
And I'm sure I'm the one who messed them all up when I was a kid. But the first album I remember listening and staring at when I was 3, 4 years old was Cosmo's Factory,
Wow.
Creedence Clearwater Revival.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it wasn't until I was in my 20s when I saw the cover of it, I was like, oh, they're in a recording studio. Like as a kid, I thought they were in a garage. I didn't understand where they were. But yeah, that, and then he loved Southern rock, so he loved Skinner. Stones were number one.
Okay.
But
Okay.
he also really loved the band,
Okay.
Bob Dylan
Love the
and
band.
Bob
Yeah.
Dylan,
Oh man.
Beatles, all Beatles all the time. I mean, it
Yeah.
was, it was what we now call classic rock, but at the time it was
Sure. Right, right. So
and
so that
actually
was really. Oh, go
yeah,
ahead. Sorry.
and Led Zeppelin was kind of a cutoff for him.
Okay.
Led Zeppelin became my music. It was a little hard, I think, for my dad.
Right.
He liked the more bluesy stuff like John Lee Hooker and
Right.
Skinner's, but Zeppelin was mine.
Zeppelin was kind of considered to because my parents were the same. Like they liked the Stones and the Beatles and Sly and the Family Stone, and I found
Hmm.
all those records, but I never found a Zeppelin record in their collection. And like you, Clem, I have all my parents' records now, and there's a mixture. But yeah, they kind of stopped at that. I think Zeppelin to that generation. Correct me if I'm wrong, or I guess that this is what I feel. That was kind of considered like early heavy metal,
Yeah,
and because I can remember my parents saying, that was just a little bit too loud for me.
yeah.
And I can't remember who coined the phrase, but I always remember saying, well, if it's too loud, then you're too old. So so it sounds like your parents, especially your dad, really supported your life goals and ambitions, and maybe you didn't necessarily know that you wanted to be a musician back in your um, pre-teens and teens, but it seemed like your father's support, at least your dad and maybe your mom too, really shaped who you are today. I mean, just from talking to you a couple times, I feel like that's what really brings out a lot of the peacefulness that I feel you have. Would you
Mm.
agree?
Yeah, I mean, I feel that the fact that I was born with two parents, and I'm not saying that we didn't have our stuff, right?
Sure,
Definitely,
sure.
but
Yeah,
to have two parents who really their goal was my well-being in at all times, that I was at the
yeah,
forefront of their thought.
yeah.
I won the lottery.
You sure did.
Now that
Yeah,
I work with folks, in the spiritual counseling method that I do and work through childhood trauma and things like that, more and more over time. I'm so grateful, really, really grateful. Yeah, I've
Any,
always felt I had a cheerleader behind me, like a
yeah,
cheerleading team behind me, and oh gosh, I wish everybody had that.
100%. I mean, that's the, I don't want to dive too deep down this rabbit hole, but I mean, I feel like that's the genesis of a lot of the mental health issues out there.
Yeah.
And it might seem very common sense to a lot of people, but it really took me, when I got out of my 20s and into my 30s to where I really had a change. Because, fortunately or unfortunately, I'm going to go with starting the sentence off with unfortunately. I grew up kind of in my 20s, very different from how I am today. I mean, I still loved music, but I was kind of closed-minded, and so I would see someone on the street that was not doing so well, and I would think, well, they made that choice. And
Mhm.
I'm so grateful that as I've gotten older, and maybe the last 20 years or so, I've had an opportunity to travel more and meet different people and really see the beauty in different people. It's clear that you have this peacefulness to you, even though you're this hardcore rockin' drummer, but that you have this foundation of peace and love. And that sounds kind of cheesy, but it's the truth. So it's just I
Yeah.
think that goes so far, and you probably pass that over and down to other family members and friends.
Well, I think that was found because the thing that the biggest thing I've struggled, like my big struggle with, which is partly in the book, is that I just, even with all of that positive reinforcement, I had just this screaming negative voice my whole life.
Right,
And
right.
I attribute a lot of that to the fact that I grew up in Southern California and Orange County, and I tend to be overweight, a little overweight, and I never felt like looked like I was supposed to look like or fit in the way I could. And as a young woman, especially in the 70s, growing up in the 70s, 80s,
Right.
there's a very narrow window of what beauty was, of what and that
Totally.
was your value. That was my value, was my beauty, right?
Yeah. Right.
The way that I looked. That was a
Yeah.
big part of it. To the point where I remember when I was, 12, standing in front of a mirror and saying, okay, well, this is what it is. So you better figure out some other way to be interesting, or to find something else that you like, because this is not going to get you where you want to go be, right?
Right.
And
Right.
that's a terrible way to judge yourself. And that discomfort, that self-attack, ended up becoming a real just self-denigration, self-hatred for a really long time. And again, like you said, that's unfortunate. It was also fortunate because it did bring me to meditation, to contemplative study, to really trying to figure myself out. Why do I hate myself so much?
Right. Right.
Why do I never feel like I'm good enough?
Right. Right.
Why am I chasing all of these external things? Because inside of me, there's something, I feel something bad, like I'm bad, and I think, man, if I can feel that way with my um all of the benefits that I was born into, then maybe I could help people to, who feel that way. Because I think then many, many people have
Did you
that
have any
feeling.
brothers and sisters growing up?
Yeah, I have two sisters, one who's 3 years younger than me, and one
Oh,
who is
nice.
16 years younger than me. She was the surprise baby.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yep, yep. And they're both magical, magical humans, and they're much lighter than I ever was. I was very miserable in high school, and kind of had I think a darker streak. And my sister Daphne, she is the ultimate extrovert. She's the one who walks into a room and the party begins, right?
Right.
She's a lot like my father, yeah.
So, I recently lost my mom. Well, it's been a couple years, and
Mm.
it sounds like it's been several for you. What was that like? I mean, without getting into the super details. I mean, what were some of the things that you went through in the grieving process when he passed? If you don't mind sharing, I know that's
Yeah,
personal.
yeah. Well, first of all, I'm real sorry about your mom. I don't think
Thanks.
that, that we I I I learned that, the hurt never goes away, but it becomes a
No,
teacher.
no, it doesn't. But you're
Yeah,
right, it does become a teacher. It
yeah,
does.
yeah. It was I had just started playing drums when my father died. And
Oh, wow.
he never saw me play drums. And we were a bit estranged. For all of the support, he was a cantankerous, could be a difficult guy. And
Right.
that thing happened to me when I hit puberty, where I really decided my father was like terrible,
The
like the
enemy. Right.
disgusting. I didn't
Yeah.
want to be near him.
Yeah.
I just, and we were
I was
just
there
at it.
too. I
We
was
were
there too.
at
Butted
it.
heads for sure. Yeah.
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 Sometimes I've told my friends who have, young girls who are going into teenhood, I'm like, listen, I know she's daddy's girl now, but there's a chance that you're going to go through a lot of years and you're going to be heartbroken, but she'll come back to
They'll
you.
come
She
back.
will come
Yeah.
back. She'll come
That's
back. She'll come
phenomenal
back.
advice. That's such great advice. And because I think you're right. A lot of parents are, it won't, not my child, or it won't happen to me. And that sort of leads me into my next question. This is like a perfect segue because I was going to ask you, was music, I guess, in your kind of rebellious stage, or maybe even today, but did music sort of become at an early age kind of an outlet to you? Meaning like, did you sort of immerse yourself in music while you were growing up to escape?
Sometimes I think back and I think about, my 8-year-old birthday slumber party,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where what I was most excited about was playing Planet Waves,
Oh,
the
nice.
band's Planet Waves for my friends. And I remember them just looking at me like, what are you, this isn't good music. Like, what are you talking about? Like just them confused, and getting the message like, oh, this is mine. This is not, I guess I'm not supposed to share this, you know. So, and then when I was, from the time I remember my little clock radio with
Mhm.
the
Yep.
sound, I mean, that was
Yep. Yep.
heaven.
Yeah.
Like sometimes I hear a song like, oh, what is that song? Midnight on the Water. What is that
Yeah.
song again?
Ah,
It's not ELO, it's darn. Might be ELO.
I'm gonna cheat and look it up.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I saw the ocean's daughter. That to me, that is transportive still when I hear it, because I think of being 11 years old and hearing the song in the middle of the night on my through my radio, and just thinking that there was something bigger out there, right?
there's two of them that I'm finding. It's probably
Mm-hmm.
not this one.
Is
It's
it ELO? Oh, and I can't get you
it
out of
is.
my
It is. It's
head.
ELO. You're right. Yep.
It's ELO, right?
ELO. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And like
Electric
that,
Light Orchestra. You got it.
yeah, when I
Yeah.
listen to that, I'm transported back into my childhood
Isn't
bedroom,
that
like
great?
with that sound coming out. And Led Zeppelin was that way for me too, and that's a beautiful thing about finding myself at this stage of the game, having spent so much time inside that music. Yeah.
You strike me as somebody that, being a deep thinker and doing everything that you do with music and spirituality. Uh, can you close your eyes and picture your bedroom growing up and literally like reach out and you can like touch your piggy bank or touch the bedpost or touch like do you have that sort of vision still to this day?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
mentioned obviously transitioning into Led Zeppelin. What drew you to the band first off? I mean, I think I could answer that question pretty quickly, but I want to hear
Yeah.
your opinion. But then also what drew you to say like this is what, I want to do in terms of like my music career, my music life. I know you do other things as well, but just as far as like joining a band that now tours and takes up a good amount of your time, like what drew you to wanting to pay this much kind of tribute to Zeppelin?
Yeah. Well, when I fell in love with Zeppelin, I wasn't a drummer. I was a
Right.
fan, I was a
Right.
young fan. I was a fan for the first, 15 years that I was listening to
Right.
Led Zeppelin, right? So,
Do you remember the first Zeppelin song you heard that did it?
no, I don't.
No.
I know that I stayed up for 3 days straight recording Led Zeppelin A to Z on a cassette tape on cassette tapes
Wow.
one weekend when they were doing that on the radio. I listened to KMET, which was a big station in Los Angeles,
Sure.
um, and they would do that play. So I never know what album any song is on because
Right.
I had
Right.
those, as
Yeah.
different songs went in. And then, coming to play Led Zeppelin, I was playing in an AC/DC band with Gretchen Menn, the guitarist of
Right.
Zepparella.
Right.
And we were in that band and we wanted to play more. And a few years prior to that, I had asked the original band that I was in, which the name of it was Bottom. They were from New York City. And I asked them if they would want to play Zeppelin songs. And I kind of wrote out a list of songs I thought were in my relative ability. And they didn't go for it. So when I was talking to Gretchen about playing, putting together a project to play more often, I said, well, I had this idea for Zeppelin. And she said, oh, I want to learn Jimmy Page's stuff. And I really just wanted to learn Bonham's playing. And
Sure.
to be honest, my idea was to kind of learn a couple songs and then learn the rest of them as a practice project. I
Right.
never thought that I would be able to play them on stage. Never.
Right. Right.
It took me so long to learn the ocean. It took me so long that I
I can
thought there's just
imagine.
no way, there's no way I'm going to be able to do this on stage. So, yeah, so the fact that that's what I've been doing for the last 18 years is very shocking to me. What has carried me through it is this deep love I have for it, and the fact that I can close my eyes and be in that bedroom and hear that music coming out of that little clock radio and remember that how I was transported by
Yeah.
it. And so I thought, if I can I'm never going to be Bonham, obviously, right? And 90% of drummers can play
Gotten
play it
fairly
better than
close.
me, right? Like everybody can play it, can do the foot thing that I can't do. Everybody can do all
I
the
don't know,
stuff that I
Clem.
can't do.
I don't know. I mean, okay, maybe a few, but I listen to a lot of music too, and I'd be willing to bet a lot of listeners would agree that you got it down pretty well, and I want to get into some of that, like the details of it in a moment, but
Thank
I didn't
you.
want to cut you off on your thought. Please continue.
Thank you for saying that. But, for
yeah.
all of my, for again, the negative voice of saying all the ways that I'm not doing it right, the one thing I know about myself is that I love it as much as anybody could possibly love it. That
Yeah.
music, it really saved me when I was in those really dark moments, being in this place and thinking like, gosh, if this is the way life is, then I don't know that I want to be going further here. And
Yeah.
it was music that brought me out of those thoughts. Like I remember seeing
Yeah.
B-52s on Saturday Night Live play Rock Lobster, and
Oh my God.
I
Yeah.
was like, that's it. Like
Yeah.
there's something else. There's some other life out there. There's some other world out there, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So that's what music means to me. And that's what I try to convey when I'm playing live and I close my eyes. I want it to sound, I want it to feel like that. Yeah.
If it keeps on raining, levee's going to break. If it keeps on raining, levee's going to break. When the levee breaks, I have no place to stay. Need old levee, taught me to weep and moan. Lean on the levee, taught me to weep and moan. He's got what it takes to make a mountain man leave his home. Ooh, well, ooh, well, ooh, well. Well, don't it make you feel bad when you're trying to find your way home? You don't know which way to go. If you're going down south, you got nowhere to
The name of your band is Zepparella, and you were saying you recently did some shows throughout Southern California, and soon, I think next week, you're heading to the Midwest and the Southeast to hit some cities like Kansas City, Omaha, Atlanta, and a bunch of others, right?
Yeah, so we tend to play, we aim to play, sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less, but at this stage of the game, we try to play about 2 weekends a month, you know, the three nights. So we do these little 3-day runs. So we'll be in Kansas City, Omaha, North Dakota, and then some California stuff, and then we'll be in Nashville and Indiana, I think, and so we kind of plop around, you know, in the States that way.
I'd love to see you guys anywhere. Do you ever stream live shows, or is there ever an opportunity? I guess maybe we could probably find something on YouTube. What's the best way, if I'm not able to get to one of your shows, what's the best way to see one of your live shows, either live or taped?
Well, you know, I think we have some very dedicated people who show up at many, many shows and try to,
Nice.
you know, plug into the soundboard and record it. every time we play a show, people say, I've been watching you on YouTube for years, and it is nothing like the real thing. And,
I'm
you know,
sure.
because Zeppelin is power. Like, you
Yep.
gotta feel the energy, right? Like, you gotta be with people around you and, you know, feel the power. But if you don't have that opportunity, then I guess YouTube is the next best thing.
How great is Nashville? I mean, just being a musician, I've been to Nashville 3 times now, and the first time I went, which was about 10 years ago, I was just blown away by, just its dedication to live music.
Yeah.
There's none of this, at least I never found any kind of dance clubs. Maybe they exist down there, but every place I went into, it was like one after the next, after the next, after the next. It was all live music. And Clem, every musician in every bar was incredible. And I just could never
Incredible.
get enough. I was there last summer, again, and it's like a Tuesday night, and I couldn't resist staying awake till 3 o'clock in the morning, which is not something I usually do anymore, since I got a lot older and had less energy. But I couldn't help it because these musicians were just so. So, what is it like playing cities like Nashville?
Well, see, a city for Zepparella, a city like Nashville can be tricky
Really?
because, yeah, because people, if you go to Nashville, what do you want to see? Right? You want to see music from Nashville. Yeah, you
I
don't
guess.
necessarily
Yeah.
want to go
Sometimes.
see, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? So that can be a little bit tricky. But
Interesting.
I love Nashville, and actually, my guitarist in my original project, Stars Turn Me On, Justin Cockett,
Hmm.
lives in Nashville now. And
Oh,
when we
cool.
play there at the end of the month, I think I'm going to do a book reading there for my book,
Oh,
uh,
cool.
and then he's going to take me around, and we're gonna check out some of the places. So I'm very excited. He's a good tour guide, so yeah,
It's always
be
key to
fun.
have tour guides in different cities to take you around. So
Yeah,
what's
it's
life
great.
like on the road for you? I mean, how has it changed over the years? What's it like now? I ask because I used to sort of dream of being a touring musician, and I have played live shows before with bands and then on my own as an independent artist, but I've never really done like a big tour like you have. What's life like on the road, or what was it like when you guys first started, and what's it like now? Is it any different, or is it kind of the same?
Well, when I started touring, I was touring with Bottom,
Hmm.
and we were a three-piece metal band from New York City.
Oh, that sounds
And
awesome.
yeah, the year 2000, we did 320 shows in a year. So
Wow,
we had
holy
the two
moly.
of us, the three of us in the van doing all the stuff. So we gave up our apartments in New York City, and we were like, we bought a new Econoline van, and we were driving back from the dealership. We had like every last bit of money we had, we like put towards this van, and we're driving back, and we're like, man, this van is nicer than my apartment, right? And we had just gotten this great new booking agent, and we were all thinking like, and we just started talking. We're like, what if we just toured all the time? And we called the booking agent, and he was like, I can do it. And so we kind of, like 2 months later, we left our relationships and apartments and everything and just moved into the van. And then it was every night, different city.
Right.
We went around the States, I think 8 times at least.
Wow.
And yeah, it just became, I mean, and that was the road times a million, right?
I'm
Because
sure.
it's every single day. You're doing all of the loading, you're doing the packing, you're going to Kinko's in the day and printing out the posters for the
Right.
next show that's coming up in a month. You're like, I mean, it's all that stuff. And we became kind of famous for like rolling up to the venue as the band before us is playing, setting up the gear in the alley, rolling in there, rocking out for an hour, and then like getting out and
Take it off.
going,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, yeah, so that was very intense, and I've never toured so intensely since. Zepparella's done a couple of month-long tours,
Hmm.
but that was quite a while ago,
Sure.
and everybody's very, very busy.
Right.
Gretchen Men, my guitarist, I mean, she's just rocking it. So, she certainly has a lot more going on. So we keep it going in a healthy way, I think.
I feel like the
Yeah.
backstage life now, or backstage world, is, correct me if I'm wrong, but like a lot different. 70s and 80s, it was, let's face it, like a lot of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, or at least a lot of craziness. When you're in your 20s too, you're like you said, you're living in a van, or you're, driving around the country in a van. You're probably living off of Big Macs, or Burger King, or whatever you can get, bread sandwiches, and you have a lot more energy. I've been to a couple shows in the last 5 years where I've had the lucky opportunity to go backstage, and it's not even close to that. Remember going to see Counting Crows backstage. We were expecting, Counting Crows, and this was 20 years ago, but Counting Crows was, a lot of songs about relationships and girls, and they were still rockers. And we went backstage, and it was like the most sterile environment you've ever seen. The band couldn't have been nicer, but it wasn't kind of what I had expected. I didn't really care, because I was just so grateful to meet the band and tell them how much they meant to me. I remember leaving and being like, wow, that was nothing that I was, thinking. So I guess as you're now today on stage, I'm curious to get your opinion or take, or your definition of what you think, or what the band Zepparella thinks is like. What's your definition of a good show?
A good show is when we're really connected musically.
Yeah.
When it's powerful and effortless, and we're getting that feeling back from the audience, and the venue levitates, right? It feels like
Yeah.
it's levitating.
Yeah.
And that's, to me, those are the good shows. And as far as the party, every night's different, right?
Sure.
And every band is different.
True.
And I know my husband is a tour manager as well, and as bands are together for long periods of time, often there's somebody who's had to get sober or something. And so it's like, okay, sober room over here, and party room over here.
Right.
And then you don't know what happens in the bus when the doors close, and what kind of shenanigans go on. So I think shenanigans go on. And I also think that for people who are in it long enough, it's work. It's hard work. I mean,
Exactly.
I'm the driver, I'm the booker. Not the booker, but the manager. I'm the one. So luckily for me, I have infinite stamina. But
Seems like
if
it.
you're playing
Yeah.
3 nights in a row, my singer, like, she's careful. She's
Yeah.
going to bed. She's not drinking.
Right.
She wants to be able to belt it out. I mean, the primary thing is that we get on stage and we give what we're there to give.
Exactly.
And if you feel like crap when you get on stage, that's no fun.
No,
You know,
not anymore,
you're
right?
too
I feel
tired.
like when we were in our 20s, I felt like I could just get through it. I don't know. I just had this like level of like, just Greg, just push through it. But
Mm.
now today, 46, I miss like an hour of sleep, and I'm cranky for a week. So I can imagine that if I had to go on the road, it would be early to bed, a little bit of partying here or there, and maybe weekend nights, but early to bed, exercise, healthy eating, limited caffeine, and I feel like that would be the way that I would be able to give 110% on stage. And and it just seems like the old me would have thought that that was the cheesiest, least rock and roll thing ever. But really now, more and more people that I talk to, Clem, it really is about the music, and it's not about the partying. Whereas I interviewed people, and they would say, well, back in the day, it was really about the party, or it was about the guys, or it was about meeting the girls. And I feel like everyone that I talk to nowadays, it really has come full circle, but it's back to really, it's about the music and putting on a good show. And you just sort of,
Yeah, and
prove
I
that as
think
well.
yeah, and I think it's always been the case of that,
Yeah.
honestly. I mean, the body can only handle so much, right?
Mm.
Now, I will say, if I had a drum tech and I had a bus and I had a tour manager, and all I had to do was
Show
to
up.
drive around and then get on stage for 2 hours and play my drums, I probably would have had a problem, you know,
Right. Me
with
too.
all that downtime and everybody around to like do whatever I want. I probably would have got myself in a lot more trouble.
Yeah.
So maybe it is a benefit that I was never hugely successful and had to work my butt off, and more than than other musicians who have a lot more support that way. So it's maybe that was good for me.
Maybe it was somewhat of a level of maturity that you kind of always had from that standpoint, because you kind of knew what, and I'm speaking somewhat for myself, but I could imagine like you sort of knew what you could handle and what you couldn't, and you just were like, well, this is what I'm going to do. And I think, I'm sharing a lot of like, it's just so great now being an adult, because I know what I can do and what I don't, and I'm less concerned about what other people think. And so it's like, I don't have a problem anymore leaving a room with 30 people and being like, I'm going to bed, guys. And they're all, I mean, especially my guy friends, they're like, you're doing what? No, you're not going anywhere. Everybody lay down in front. Don't let them out. And then like, 20 years ago, I would succumb to that pressure. But I didn't look at it as like peer pressure, more just like, hey, we want you to hang out with us, so don't go. Whereas now it's like, hey, I'm out. I'm going to bed. And it's not every night, but on certain nights. And I guess I'm just, it seems like it's better when you're older, because you know your limits and you really are, thinking more like, I'm so lucky to be here. And I'm so lucky to be doing this for whatever, 20 plus or so years. And I think it's maybe easier, but also getting back to, what you were saying about, the likelihood of people having a problem, for sure. But it seems like a lot of folks like especially like yourself, like you had that ability to say like, here's what I can do and here's what I can't do. And quite frankly, I don't know if I necessarily want to do X, Y, and Z anymore. Maybe every once in a while, but for the most
Yeah.
part.
Well, and I really believe that touring, like somebody who really lives on the road, is able to really live on the road for long periods of time, it's a constitutional thing.
Yeah.
I can get 3 hours of sleep, wake up at 6 in the morning, drive for 12 hours, unload my gear, set it up, play 2 2-hour Led Zeppelin shows, get off stage, party, be the last man standing. That's my physicality. I don't know anybody else who can do that. And that's just, it's the way I'm built. I
Yeah.
just can do that. And
Uh,
so, and I think about, going on the road with the real big bands that my husband has toured with, and seeing those people who are the techs, who are I have a great friend from the UK who, his father was a sound man, and now he's one of the best sound men in the world. And, he's spent
oh,
his life
nice.
on the road since he was 12 years old, right?
Right.
Doing sound and, and it's a different constitution, it's a different way of being. And actually, there's a real kernel of just peacefulness. Like, you have to be okay with everything that comes. You
Yeah.
have to be able to find that that strength and fortitude within you, and have it be easy to do. If you have a problem with sleep, you're probably not gonna want to live on the road,
For
because
sure.
you can say, I'm going to get off stage and go right to sleep because I have a big show tomorrow, and I'll get off stage, and as I'm sleeping, I can hear the crowd in my head. As I'm
Right.
sleeping in my
Right.
dreams,
Right.
there's so much sound. My body is like buzzing when I
Yep.
get into bed after playing for 2 hours. Like, it's just, I'm not going to bed. I'm not going to sleep heavy, right? I'm going to wake up at 6:30 in the morning, because the week before at home, I was waking up at 6:30 in the morning.
Right.
And, it's like, sleep is not, yeah, it's not going to happen.
This talking about this reminded me. I did a review a few months back on The Last Waltz, the wonderful album and movie by
Mm-hmm.
the band, and there was a scene in the movie where Robbie Robertson says "the road," it's a goddamn impossible way of life. And I just loved that, especially kind of coming from him. Now, I haven't had even close to as much experience as the band has or you, but I just, I don't know. I held on to that quote and am always interested to ask people like yourself what your, thoughts are about it. Getting back to your drumming again, before I'm moving on to a couple other things, I suppose it's easy to be drawn to drummers like Bonzo because of his talent. I'm very curious. This is one of the questions that I've been burning inside me to ask you. Who are some other drummers that are up there for you that have really influenced you in addition to Bonzo?
There's one drummer who was the biggest influence to me, honestly, because I saw him live many, many times. And I saw him when I first started playing drums. Like I had been playing drums for maybe 6 months, and I saw him play, and I felt this thing happen in my mind, like it was like osmosis, like something, a little thing just twisted in my head. And that's Dale Crover of the Melvins. And,
sure.
I think he is just one of the unsung. I mean, everybody who knows him knows how spectacular of a drummer he is, but I really do believe he's never really gotten his due as the creative, the powerful, the innovative drummer that he is. I just think he is a spectacular drummer, and I've seen him so many times, and every time I see him, that thing happens in my head where something, I go into the studio next time and something shifts. Something shifts for me. Now, Dave Grohl replaced him in Nirvana. I guess the job in Nirvana was offered to Dale before Dave Grohl took it. So I would say Dave Grohl is. Yeah, I would say Dave Grohl is. I think that he and I have very similar drumming style. And I didn't really get into Nirvana until after they were over. I was living in New York when that whole Seattle scene happened, and I was hanging out in the hip hop studio where my boyfriend was working. So I was listening to hip hop all the time. So that all passed me by, even though I ended up playing music very similar to that in Bottom. So it's kind of funny that I kind of missed it, but now I look at his playing and I think, that's a similar style. And I wouldn't say that he was an influence, but now I can see that that style of drumming somehow seeped into me. I don't really have the punk rock background that he has. I was never big into that punk rock. As far as wanting to play it, it's not my speed. I'm more of a slower, heavier drummer. So
I had an opportunity to see the Melvins in 1993. So, and Dale, I think, if I remember correctly, Dale started with the Melvins in like the mid 80s, right? So he must have been the drummer during. Dale must have been.
He was
the drummer
already
during
drumming.
That. Yeah. He must have been the drummer for the Melvins. So I was in a small theater in Boston, and I'll never forget that day. I had just spent the most money that I'd ever spent on a pair of shoes. They were black Doc Martens with the yellow stitching, and I thought I was the coolest mother effer in the world. And I go to the show, and the Melvins come on stage, and I looked at my friend and I said, I'm going to try the mosh pit. And he was like, are you sure, Greg? You weigh like 130 pounds or whatever. And I said, I'm going. And I went in, and about a minute later, stumbled back to my seat, and Zach, my friend, said, what happened? And I said, I lost my shoe. So apparently my shoe fell off, just one, and not the other one. I must have not tied it tight enough. But that is whenever the Melvins comes up, Clem, that is what I think about. And I just remember how damn heavy they were and how much energy they gave me. And I never found the shoe. And so I had to go home and tell my parents, like, hey, I lost one shoe, not both.
That totally cracks me up, because I played concerts and been walking out to the merch afterwards, and there'll be a shoe there in the middle of the
Yeah.
Like in the middle of the thing, I'll be like, who would walk out of here without their shoe?
It's happened to me
And I'm gonna think of
twice.
you.
It happened to me. It's happened to me twice. The other time was at Metallica
Uh-huh.
not long ago, like 5 years ago, and I had the same thing. I looked at my friend and said, "I've just got so much energy right now. I'm going in." And now I was wearing these Skechers, and they were like the slide-ins, so there was no lacing
Oh
or
yeah,
and but my
right.
fondest memory of that was I did get my shoe back, but the guy who hit me in the mosh pit immediately bent down, put his hand out, and was like, "Are you okay? I'm so
Oh
sorry."
yeah,
And I was like, "Yeah, yeah."
yeah,
Well, it was like this immediate understanding that it wasn't anything personal, that we were just
yeah.
reacting to the music. But anyway, I love the fact that you mentioned the Melvins. I'm like, I've got to get this story out there. But
I'm
yeah,
so happy you told me that.
Doc
Yeah,
Martin is
great.
out there somewhere wandering in the ether. So this has been burning inside me, and I wanted to ask. And I know when we talk about music, I more or less now today I am less interested in defining like who the top is, who the best is, because it's really all opinion. But I love whenever I talk drummers, I love to get a feel for, who people think are up there. And the reason this has come up is the last several years, I feel like I've listened to interviews from Dave Grohl, from Taylor Hawkins, God rest his soul,
Mhm.
from who was the other guy? Chad Smith from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. And they all say, including my circle of friends and people that I know in the music business, they all say Bonzo is, in terms of rock and roll drummers, is the greatest of all time. And these are real drummers. So like they have this, I feel like their opinions weigh heavily. They've essentially all anointed Bonzo as the GOAT. However, I wanted to ask, because I'm wildly curious, has Neil Peart, the drummer from Rush, ever been on your radar?
So when people talk about the greatest drummer, right? I think probably what every drummer thinks is they want to say Neil, right? Because Neil was so innovative, in this in the way he played. I mean, I know he influenced Dale the most, right?
Okay.
And um and so, I mean, his chops are just so precise. Like everything is so precise, and he's singing melodies on the drums. I mean, a great drummer sings melodies. Bonzo does that too, but
Sure.
Neil's melodies they're really interesting,
Yeah.
and the music is really powerful and wonderful, right? And
Yeah.
I think the reason that people say Bonham is because Bonham, the way, like we talk about feel, right? And to me, and I talk a lot about this in the book, like feel is about the space between the quarter notes,
Yep.
right? Because that's where we can just subtly change the feel of the song by just playing just a hair behind the downbeat, a hair in front of it, just waiting a little bit. And Bonham is a master. It's like that that knowledge he has of where to place, of how he places the beats. It's so impossible to replicate. And I think it's because, and I don't even think he knew he was doing it.
Right.
I think he was just a deeply emotional person who that was his outlet.
Right.
And
Right.
that's how he spoke. That's how, you think of men from that age, they didn't have an outlet to talk about emotion, right? And obviously
No.
Bonham was a troubled guy. I
Right.
mean, anybody who dies the way he did and the way he, lived when he was drunk, we all know those horrible stories. And,
Yeah.
it's obviously he had a lot of stuff happening underneath him, and he was
Yeah.
expressing it on the drums. And to me, that's the fact that he let us in to that, I think, is why we it's like a visceral feeling that connects to our own need to express ourselves emotionally. And Neil Peart is maybe a better technical player, and but Neil, he's not a guy who I think let us into his internal world, or maybe his internal world was a lot more structured and not as kind of fomenting as Bonham's, right? So I don't know. It's a very vague thing because, you know, now you see 7-year-olds who play Bonham's parts and you're like, oh, it can't be that hard to beat John Bonham, right?
Well, I mean,
but there's that, it's the feel. That's why. And it's the feel, and it's what he let us feel with his playing. Yeah.
You couldn't have put it any better, Clem. And again, I want to be clear, like, I don't necessarily, I think that it was really all about opinion, right? But the way you just put it, you could have said Neil is 80th on your list and I would have been cool with that. What the reason I asked, and what sometimes bugs me, is like when Neil's not even in the conversation, you know. I feel like some of the so I play little drums, nothing crazy, but like to my right now, I've got a little Frankenstein kit that I put together about 3 years ago, and I love it. I'm originally a bass player and I still play bass, but there's something about the backbeat and the drums that just excite me. And I would call bass playing, you know, sort of my blood, but I would call drums like a hobby that I'm just completely in love with. Some of the drummers that influenced me, just from, you know, I always had this joke with my friends where we would listen to music and have this shock reaction, and people who weren't musicians who were in the room would see us and be like, what, did your house just burn down? What are you? And we're like, no, I'm reacting to the music here. But it was like, whenever I heard Bonzo, whenever I heard Neil, whenever I heard Keith Moon, Ginger Baker, Stuart Copeland, and these are some of the standards, obviously. And I'm not talking about jazz. I'm not talking about other genres, just like strictly rock. And then I would say Phil Collins as well. Like those were the 5 or 6 that just really, and again, I know music's an art form. It's obviously difficult to choose or say who's the best, but you know, for argument's sake, you have a trained ear and you're very skilled at drumming, and you can hear drummers play beats that make you say, whoa, like, how did he do that? And for me, like, I listen to you drum and I'm like, whoa, how did she do that? And I think that, you know, you can measure it by level of difficulty, you know, in terms of like a drummer's skill, meaning how many other people can play it the same way. But I think the way that you just put it in terms of Bonzo, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think his talent stems from a lot of what you just said. I also feel like, and wanted your opinion on this, is like, when I started getting into drums, a friend of mine who's a really good drummer was like, let me teach you how to play triplets. And I remember being like, whatlets? I'm sorry, huh? And he was like, triplets. And Bonzo's use of just one bass drum with one pedal, but if you listen to it, it sounds like he's got 2 bass drums. So as a very, very, very amateur drummer, I find it extremely difficult. So I would argue, and I won't dive down this rabbit hole too much, but you know, Neil did 99% of the songwriting for Rush, and a lot of them, you know, songs like Limelight and things like that, about being on a lighted stage, and I Can't Pretend a Stranger is a Long-Awaited Friend. You know, those are examples of some songs where I think he did. I'm Greg Potters with albumreview.net. Are you looking to start your own podcast? I can save you a ton of time and money by helping you launch, publish, and grow your podcast. So this includes things like finding the equipment, the software, and tips and tricks that are gonna be right for you and your budget. Also, if you're looking for things like editors, designers, or you just wanna find out what the best platform to use is, that's what I do. So you can find me at albumreview.net or message me directly at gpotters@albumreview.net. I wanted to get into your book now. In February, you published a book called From Bonham to Buddha and Back, The Slow Enlightenment of the Hard Rock Drummer. Love that title, by the way. And you noted that a lot of the ideas from your book came from your blog, Bliss and Drumming, which you started, I think, back in 2016. Did I get that right?
That's right.
Yeah. And I read one of your profiles that in the essays of your blog, and I'm quoting you, tales of your music career provided metaphor for contemplative practice. And you harness many of these tales and stories for this book. Did I get that right?
Yeah, I started off, the pandemic happened, and I thought, well, maybe I'll put the blog's been going for several years. Maybe I'll kind of just put them all together in a book and be done with it. And of course, when I started doing that, I started thinking, oh, there's more structure, more story, more beef that needs to be added to it. So, but some of these pieces did show up originally in the blog. Yeah, were fleshed out.
Now, I also want to convey to the listeners that although a musician's life can seem wild, and we were talking about this a little bit earlier, you have a serious, in my opinion, calmness to you, Clem. You're certified in contemplative psychotherapy and conflict resolution, and you've been a Vipassana, did I pronounce that correctly?
Yeah,
Vipassana
perfect.
meditator for over 30 years now, which is a form of meditation that originated out of India, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Talk
Well,
to me a little bit more about that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so the real backbone of my book is about how drumming and meditation found me at the same time. And like I said, I was trying to understand myself. I was trying to understand how to, just be a lot more peaceful within myself. And I went to a 10-day meditation course, silent retreat, right around the same time that I started playing drums. And I had, just caught me. And I just saw so much benefit. I had kind of a big, kind of what they would call like a spiritual opening, where I kind of had a sense of a bigger, something bigger than me. And so for a long time, I just saw, okay, I have this meditation stuff that I do, and this constant kind of spiritual seeking, reading, a lot of, trying different practices. And then I have this rock and roll life, and here I am. Here's Clem. She's divided in two. She's got these two things. And in the last 10 years, as I started to develop a counseling practice and got certified in all of these different ways, I started to understand that it's all one thing. The messages that I learn on the meditation mat about letting go of my attachments and my aversions, those Buddhist ideas. It's the same thing when I'm sitting on stage, closing my eyes and watching my left foot and trying not to get distracted by the guy leaping on stage, or all the bad sound or all that stuff. I still have to be in that center of myself, that non-reactive center of myself. And so in my writing, I've used my music career to illustrate, what does it look like? Okay, we know meditation is supposed to make you calm, but how do you really apply it when you're sitting in traffic or arguing with your spouse, or
Right.
all of these different things? And the amazing
In the
thing,
moment, right? Sorry to cut you off, but
yeah,
it's like
in
in
the
the
moment.
moment. Yeah.
Yeah, in the moment. And how, we think, okay, well, I'm going to sit on the meditation mat for 10 minutes, and then I'm going to get up and I'm going to go running off into my day. But that time that you spend, even that little bit, it does sort of kind of seep into your moments where you're taking a step back. You're not immediately reacting, because,
Right.
that's a suffering life when things happen. And talking about those guys who are on the road forever. Their funniest stories are where they're standing back and watching the tour bus slide down the hill, in the, in the snow, or, the plane, like, that is just not going to get them there in time for the big festival. Like, they just have to be non-reactive because there's nothing you can do about it. And that's a big
Yeah.
lesson, I think.
I think that's one of the most difficult things. I know it is, at least for me. And it's been something I've been working on for most of my adult life, is just finding calmness and peace. And lately, I've found a lot of it. Well, I've been meditating now for about 3 years, certainly not to the level that you are, but that was just another thing. I mean, I find this, Clem, fascinating. And it was like what first drew me to want to talk to you was your drumming. And I just have to say really quickly, from a guy's point of view, it's cool to see a tribute band, but in my opinion, it's just even cooler to see a tribute band of women that just can rock out like you guys can. It just, to me, it's just, because I've seen 1,000 bands of guys, and to me, it's just like, next. When I dug deeper into your background and I learned more about your calmness and your meditation practices, I myself, like I said, I suffer from anxiety, and I've been working on using the tools that I've learned over the years to combat anxiety and stay consistent. And some days, and maybe you can attest to this, or some people that maybe you talk to, some days these tools are effective for me, and other days not so much. I guess, do people contact you and ask you to counsel them? Is that part of your spiritual journey, or have you created kind of like a business out of this as well?
Yeah, so I am a practitioner in a few modalities. One of them is called depth hypnosis,
Right.
and it was created by a teacher named Isa Gucciardi in Berkeley, California. And it's a marriage between, Western psychological method, especially transpersonal psychology, which brings into the idea that spirit is a part of healing, right? It's not just the mind. And then we've got Buddhism, which provides a really wonderful structure. Buddhism has a lot of really great structures when you're trying to understand your thoughts and how to use the mind to fall beneath thought. It seems kind of like a dichotomy, but it's very about using our mind. It's not avoiding our mind. It's not running from our thoughts, but it's about witnessing them and being able to find the awareness into which those thoughts rise, right? And then shamanism, which is, we say shamanism, there's a lot of woo-woo around shamanism these days, but really it is earth-based wisdom. A shaman is someone who for 100,000 years has looked at the natural world and seen the lessons that the natural world gives us and translates those lessons to the community, right? And it's very embodied. It's kind of like an embodied spirituality. And so we're using those techniques of traditional shamanism that might seem very kind of out there, and yet really what we're working with is metaphor. If I say I'm doing a power retrieval and you go into a meditation and I guide you to connect with the part of yourself that has your best interest at heart, and it looks like a bear, well then when you're walking, when you're in a situation where you're feeling very uneasy or anxious or something, and you can close your eyes and take a few breaths and connect with the bear, you're connecting with the part of yourself that has your best interest at heart, which we forget we even have. Right. So that's a very simple kind of way of explaining the kind of work that I do. So it's using metaphor, it's using meditation techniques, and it's usually using some of the kind of, the questioning techniques that we find in Western psychology to help people connect with that part of themselves that really knows. You say, I want to become more peaceful. I want to become more non-reactive. We already are. I mean, it is, and we find it in peaceful moments. Well, how do we find that in chaotic moments?
Right. Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
That's the
So
key.
that's how I work with people. And that modality has been, there's a peer-reviewed study of it helping people for PTSD and trauma, depression, anxiety. We work with those standard things, and we work, and we also connect. A lot of us are very disconnected from even what we even think of as spirituality, or a bigger picture than us. How do we fit into
Right.
this? What is it? The kind of the big existential meaning. We don't need to say God or whatever, it is, but we're disconnected from what we even think of that way. And a
Yeah.
lot of people have a lot of trauma around, previous religious ideas and stuff. And so that this work can be helpful in that too.
Is it safe to say that, and you kind of alluded to this already, but this was a question that I had prepped and jotted down before we started talking. Is it safe to say that, really the genesis of why you help people today, does it stem from sort of some of your experience suffering from anxiety as a teenager or as a younger child?
Yeah, I would say my the suffering that I felt was really depression.
Mhm.
It was a darkness. It was a hopelessness. And that hopelessness came from having such a negative, judgment about
Right.
myself, constant judgment, just wearying judgment, where it
Right.
could be crippling. I didn't want to
Yeah.
be, I didn't want to do things because I felt I wasn't worthy to do, right? Or
Right.
connect, and all of those, that real darkness of depression. And at one point I was, diagnosed as having depression, and they're like, okay, well, take this medication. And I was like, okay, well, I don't really like to take medication, but I'll
Right.
take it. And it kind of
Same.
balanced me out. And I
Right.
thought, all right, I'm going to go. I'd heard that going to a particular kind of therapy was really helpful. And I went in and I sat down, and we were talking about how I wanted to get off the medication. And so
Mhm.
how could they help me? And he said, well, have you ever meditated? And it just like hit me, like that's where I had been
That's it.
compartmentalizing my
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
Here I
Light
was.
bulb.
At that point, I'd been meditating for 20 years, like I just lost my way, I lost
Yeah.
my way. And so it was very easy to get back. Yeah.
Well, I must say, you certainly have a way about you, so calm, cool, and collect, but also you have a humbleness to you that I think is, really
Thank you.
drawing. And, I think if we got on this call and you were like, yeah, no, I don't really think about it. I just go up there and kick ass and I'm really good. And yeah, well, Greg, I mean, I'm here because I'm just really good. Like the fact that you're vulnerable and you can admit that, I think just makes you that much more fuller of a
Thank you.
person, in my opinion. So, and with that said, in addition to your calmness, or maybe it's juxtaposed with the fact that you can still slam on the drums live on stage and make people's jaws drop, especially mine. This is what, as I said, that was what sort of first got me interested and excited to want to interview you. And then I'm just learning so much more.
I needed to go.
Getting back, I'm jumping around a little bit, but these are all great topics. Getting back to your book, is there a particular narrative, and I think you've alluded to this already, but is there a particular narrative or message that you're trying to convey to every reader of your book, like a lesson?
Well, let's see. Is there a lesson? The lesson is ultimately that, and this, I'm gonna start getting really, start getting really gooby.
I'll be right there with you.
Yeah, the lesson is that we are enough. Everybody's enough, and I know that so many people don't think they are, right? I'm sorry, I always get that way, but about this because I know how much people suffer. But there's a way to connect to that part of yourself that's enough, that knows it's enough, that can trust what's right. We get ourselves in these situations that seem so overwhelming and so much pain and sorrow, and we think that that's just the way that we are now, and that's just the way life is, and we look outside and we see so much negativity and we think that is what it is, and we feel powerless to help the situation, but we each have it in us. We each have that spark of the divine.
Yeah.
And I really believe that. Yeah.
It's so infectious just talking to you, and I think we all, or a lot of us at least, feel that way, and it's just heartwarming to know that I'm not the only one out there, and I'm sure you've felt that way as well, that you're not the only one out there, and you can find this community of people. I'm assuming it's probably a huge community of people in music, because let's face it, most people, at least like you and I, musicians, we go to music because it's something higher than us or bigger than us, and it just brings out the spirituality. So thank you for sharing that, and being vulnerable. I think it just makes you an even stronger person, in my opinion. Okay, to some fun stuff. A question I always wanted to ask you as well. Can you think of one or two of the most, like, being as a spectator, one or two of the most memorable concert experiences that you've ever had?
I always say the same one, but it was so powerful because it was really my first concert, which was Rolling Stones, LA Coliseum, 90,000 people with my father took me. We each got to bring a friend. Prince opened, George Thorogood opened.
Oh my God.
Prince opened, and he got booed off the stage by 90,000 people. Which says more about Stones fans than it ever said about Prince. I think that if you get booed off the stage by 90,000 people, you've kind of made it, right?
Yep.
You're going to be a success. So, that's a very, very memorable concert to me. Yeah.
That is awesome.
Yeah, really lovely. Yeah.
It's so funny because I didn't have as much of an appreciation for Prince in the early days, and I think a lot of it personally was his image. But when and this might sound cliche, but when I heard him play While My Guitar Gently Weeps,
oh God,
at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame,
unbelievable.
It changed everything. And I still say this a lot, Clem, like, one of the things that I miss more than anything in the world is, and they still exist out there, there's actually one in my hometown, I'm grateful to say, but is going to the record store and walking in the door. And, and in many cases I knew what I wanted, and I would walk right to the aisle and go to the P section and pull out that Prince album. But then there were other times where I would just walk through, and it was like I'm getting really cheesy here, but it was like my church. And I would go in and I would just listen to whatever the guys or the girls behind the desk were playing. and I would go up to them and it's like, what is this? What are you guys playing? And then I would walk through the aisles and I would literally pick out albums just based on the cover. So anyway, I hearken back to that because I remember feeling that way. I might have been one of those people that booed Prince off the stage, like especially when he had his pants where like his butt was showing. But then,
He had big high boots, and and it was like 100 degrees out, and the Stones fans were like, "No, we're not going for it." And he's playing guitar behind his head, and he's amazing. He's amazing,
incredible.
right?
He's incredible. Yeah, that's awesome. That's a great story. What are some other interesting or exciting encounters that you've had, or have you had any with other musicians from the rock and roll genre?
I've had many. I've been really lucky. You know, like I said, my husband is a tour manager,
Right.
musician and tour manager, and so I've been very privileged to be able to meet a lot of my heroes. Okay, so this is one story I haven't told in a while, is that when I lived in New York City, I befriended this man who was Keith Richards, one of Keith Richards' personal managers.
Okay.
And he called me one day and he said, "Listen, it's Ronnie Spector's birthday down at this little club. I can't even remember the name of the club. Down at this little club, Ronnie Spector's birthday. Keith has asked for his gear to be sent down. I don't know for sure he's going to show up, but do you want to go?" Right? Now, of course, I went, and I was, just standing at the bar. There weren't that many people there yet, and I was just kind of standing there, and my friend like grabbed me, was like, "Keith is behind you." And I looked, and he was just kind of had this beatific smile and was just smiling and just kind of falling his way like across, like from one end of the bar to the other. People are kind of like around him and stuff. And I was like, "That's awesome. Like, that's as close as I ever need to be." Right.
Right.
And then
Yeah.
and then he was in another room, and then Ronnie Spector started playing, and Joey Ramone was on stage with her, and then here comes Keith, and he comes over, and he's just got this smile, and people like took him and they like put his guitar on him, and he's just standing there, and then they just kind of pushed him up on the stage, and he was standing there, and he looked so wiggly, like he must have been messed up, right? I mean, he must have been Keith, or else he was putting on a great Keith act,
I
right?
can picture him like floating, like he wasn't even walking. He was just sort
It
of
was like his
floating.
feet weren't even, people were kind of holding him up, right, as he was going, and they put him up on stage, and he just, bam, was Keith.
Oh my God.
It was unbelievable, and he was like
Oh.
on his knees playing to Ronnie Spector, and it was just this unbelievable show. And
Oh
then
my God.
then he stood up and he just kind of fell off the stage, and they like caught him, right? And then the show is over. My friend's like, come backstage and meet Keith, right? And I was like, I don't want to. I never want to meet, people.
Yeah.
He's like, "No, come backstage." And we go back, and it's this big goofy room, and it's got this big table in it, and there are people like all around, and Keith is on one end, and he was like, come meet him. And I was like, "No, this is enough. I do not, like, what am I gonna do? What am I gonna say? Hey,
Yeah.
good to see you."
Yeah, right.
He's talking to people. He's doing his thing. Yeah.
That's so funny, Clem. I have the same mindset, and it's
Yeah.
I wonder why sometimes, because I feel like I've had missed opportunities, but I have this weird like subconscious thing inside me that I can't, I use the word like fanboy out. So I've met, actors and musicians, and now I don't know what I would do if I ever met David Gilmour. I might faint. But everybody else that I've met, I can't believe I'm admitting this, but like I went the other direction
Me
where
too.
I was like, "And what is it you do? Are you you're in music? Oh, meanwhile, like I have all of their albums, but I found that to work sometimes where they're like, "Oh, okay, this guy's not going to drool over me. I can have a regular conversation." So I'm with you. I guess the point I'm trying to make is that I'm like, what am I going to say to them? I really love there's that famous Chris Farley
Yeah.
On Saturday Night Live when he's like,
Remember that
Paul,
time?
remember when you were in the Beatles, Paul?
Right.
So I'm totally with you. Like, I don't know. I've been invited before too, and I'm like, nah, I'm gonna pass. And I don't really know what I would say. And of course, sometimes I look at it as maybe missed opportunity. It's like the last time I had an opportunity, I was like, I should ask him to be on the podcast. But then I'm like, no, I've had like 7 beers. I'm not in a position right now where I could actually have a pleasant conversation with them. I'll just start drooling. So wanted to ask you this for a while. Where do you see the music business today? Like, where do you see it moving to?
Well, I'm probably the last person to ask. I think that, see, for me, everybody says, the music business is, it's gone so downhill, blah, blah, blah. I don't see that at all. I think there's this huge, I mean, you can make a record in your living room.
Right.
That's amazing.
It is.
It's amazing. I go down to
really is.
I have a studio that I have worked at for 20 years in San Francisco with this gentleman, Rob Preston, who's a dear friend of mine. And it is the most fun in the world to go in that rehearsal studio. And I can go in a recording studio and we go in there and we goof around and we make records and we put them out and I can do it and nobody ever hears it and I don't care, but it's out there, it's in the world, right? And I think that's magical. I wish that things like Spotify actually paid artists. I mean, I really, I wish that I can't listen to, like, I can't sign up yet because I feel bad for the way that people just don't make money. And I think I spoke to a friend of mine who said it's just such an easy shift that they have to make as far as, I can't remember if it's like times listened or, there's some easy algorithm to make it so that everybody kind of makes more money with, the artists make money. I think music isn't valued, for all the time that people put into it. I don't think that it's valued in the right way, and and the work that artists do. And I would say when people, if you have someone in your life who's a musician and or any kind of artist, even if you're buddies with them, even if they're their friend's girlfriend or whatever, just support them, just buy them, they're just buy it, even if it's not music you even like, it's like somebody is putting their heart and soul into doing something. It's very rare that a musician has an ulterior motive other than self-expression, and self-expression is very important for us as humanity. And I think that the music industry right now is wonderful because anybody can express themselves, and I think that's a wonderful thing. So as far as the finances go, I have no clue. But
I think I remember Spotify noting that they do pay per stream, right? But you really have to get to, I mean, it's something like, it's less than a penny per stream. So you really have to, where artists are profiting is when they have millions of streams, right? So
so the people who get paid are over here, and then it goes like, and then all these artists get paid like the 99%. It's just like the 1%. It's the same in the music industry. Somebody's got 5 guys got all the money, right? So that's just how it is.
I asked this question of every musician that I've interviewed, and it's just so enlightening and heartfelt. It's not the right term, but like, it's just so comforting that you're right on track with like everybody else I've talked to. Like, everyone's just in it for the music, and that's what I think is so great. I do have to admit that I ask these questions a lot of everybody because I do have a little bit of like, in my day, remember when type of thing, and I get constantly made fun of by my kids. And you know what? I think I'm a good target because I do say that. I mean, as I'm sitting here right now, I'm looking, and about 20 feet from me is my entire CD collection, and it's, ceiling to floor. And I'm never going to throw them out. I said to my wife, like, we're going to pick out a few so that whenever I do pass, I can be buried with some of those. And I realize it doesn't necessarily have to be about physical things, but I do really supporting musicians. But just seeing a band like Zepparella and the fact that you guys are keeping rock and roll alive is just awesome to me and so motivating. And I worry sometimes that rock and roll in a way is dead. And what a lot of people that I've interviewed on the show have said to me is, Greg, it's not. There's so much out there. You just have to go out and look.
Well,
And
that's the difference, isn't it? I mean, that's
you
the
have to
difference
you have to look though,
from
right?
before is
Right.
that, and it's just like I think we're all being required, whether it's, you know, whatever we're consuming, we're all being required to do our own research. It's not
Exactly.
fed. It's not the
It's not
two
fed.
guys on
Yep.
television who are
Yep.
telling us what to do anymore. We gotta
Right.
go, unless you want to listen to the thing that corporate America is telling you to listen to, you know, if you have any interest in anything else other than what's just coming to you from the big voices, you
Yeah.
know, you got to do your research. But that's the fun of it, right? I
Yeah.
mean, that's you in the record store going, I mean, I can't go into a record store with my husband because I've never been a record collector and he is. So
Yeah.
it's like he gets into this, like, it's just like I can't speak to him. He speaks in monotones. It's like I'm gonna go down this. I've gone down. I've had like margaritas at the bar, like down the street for like 3 hours, and come back, and he's still like in this thing, you know, Amoeba Records in San Francisco. Forget
Oh
it.
my
Like,
God.
no,
Love Amoeba. Oh my God. That place. The first time I went in there, it was, yeah. I mean,
yeah,
I
yeah,
used to sneak into Boston when I was 13. My parents weren't very, they didn't want me to go into the city by myself or without an adult, and I would do it anyway. Surprise, surprise, mom and dad, if you hear this. But I would go in, I would take the, you know, we call it the T here, the subway, and I would go in, and Clem, I would spend the entire day, you know, I get a slice of pizza and a Coke, and then I would spend the entire day at Tower Records. And
yeah.
I've been to LA 1,000 times, but the couple of years ago when I was there, a friend of mine who's a musician, he said, I'm taking you to Amoeba today. And I was like, what is that, like a tech company? And he was like, no,
Oh,
no, 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 no. And I didn't realize there's one in San Francisco as well.
yeah.
I'm regretting now the last time I was there that I didn't go there. But yes, I go. So I probably get along with your husband a lot where we'd have that like relationship where it's like, okay, you go over there and I'll go over here and let's not talk for 2 hours and then I'll see you right back here. But yeah, it was, for me, a lot of it too, as I said, it was a lot about the artwork. I don't really see a lot of, you know, you don't really see a lot of, I mean, it exists, but you have to kind of look at it on your phone, and it doesn't
Well,
really do it
and
as much.
I think it's multimedia now, right? I mean, people are
Exactly.
being very creative
Yeah.
with their you know, with their videos and, you know, all of the extra stuff that people are putting into their music, you know, and that is a difficult thing as a musician. You know, you have to be the you know, the designer and the marketer and the,
Yep.
you know, you have to wear all those hats,
Yep.
and
Yeah.
you know, that is a challenge, but it's also a great creative output, you know.
Yeah.
You know, you really have this vision of the whole thing, and nobody's telling you what it's supposed to be. You get to decide.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, I'm getting close to wrapping up here. If I'm being honest, I could do this like all day and all night.
I
I mean,
feel that way too.
it's so super
I feel
interesting.
that way too.
For those folks out there that visit albumreview.net on a regular basis, I, in many cases, and with your blessing, I'd love to do this as well. I'd love to share the link, you know, basically back to your website or to
Great.
wherever you sell for your book, as well as your music on the site, so that my visitors can just immediately go to your site and purchase your book.
Oh, thank you.
For the people that are out there that are listening to this right now, I'm optimistic that, you know, you come to albumreview.net for a couple reasons, but some of them are, you know, my reviews, the interviews that I think can touch a special place in your heart and bring back great memories. And if you know, people out there enjoy albumreview.net up to now, you're really going to enjoy Clementine Moss's book, From Bonham to Buddha and Back, The Slow Enlightenment of the Hard Rock Drummer. And you can order a copy of Clem's book by going to her website, clementinemoss.com, right? That's all one word.
No, it's Clem the Great.
Clem the
Greg
Great.
is, yeah,
Okay.
Clementine Moss is kind of the spiritual counseling stuff, and
Okay. Okay.
Clem the Great kind of has the links to all of the different
Okay.
bands,
That was
to
the site I
books,
was
all
on
the
then.
stuff.
Okay. I thought it
That's
was
right.
okay. All
Yeah.
right. I'm glad I asked. Before we wrap up, is there anything, else that you'd like to add, or anything that, I might have forgotten or missed?
I'm just really grateful for what you're doing. I mean, like I told you before we got on, I was listening to the Revolver review, and oh my gosh, I was just remembering how those songs felt like they feel like sunlight when I look back, because I was so young. Like it's like I can get into my younger self when I listen to those songs and how much they meant to me. And um, yeah, so I really appreciate what you do, Greg. I think you do a great job.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hmm.
That means a lot, especially coming from someone like yourself that is such a, in my opinion, and I think it holds some weight a little bit just because of all the music I listen to, but just such an established musician. And
Hmm.
you've got so many of these interesting pieces to your life, Clem, and I just hope that you keep up with them. If you do me an honor of being a guest on another episode down the road, I'd love to, maybe review an album that's special to you.
I'd
And
love that.
the Revolver one I did was with a musician that I met out of the Buffalo area, Jason Myrick, and Jason's music has influenced me so much. And it's just, I
Mm.
call it driving music because I like to listen to him when I'm driving on like a really nice sunny day. I've invited other musicians back to do reviews, and I think that they've just been able to add so much more color
Mm.
to some of these albums. What I also really love about doing this is that I get to dive deeper. I did one several months back on the Talking Heads, and I was never a huge Talking Heads fan growing up. I never
Yeah.
disliked them because, they were all over MTV, but I got to, for like 3 weeks while I was researching before I wrote this review and then did the podcast, I got to like just live in their world for that
Yeah.
amount of time, and that's really what I love, and
Neat.
about all these, so
I could tell
um,
Jason did that too when he
yeah,
was talking. Yeah.
yeah, he
Yeah. He
certainly.
he really had research too. It was a great interview.
I wish you the best of luck on tour,
Thank
and
you.
I'm gonna be, I'm like when I go back upstairs. I'm in my studio right now, but when I go back upstairs, I'm gonna be cranking your version of Moby Dick. That's right
Oh
now one of
God.
my favorites. And then Levy. So Levy. So I think you already know this, but for like people who don't know, like there's this famous, I'm going to butcher words now because it's late on a Friday here for me and I should be cracking a beer soon. There's this famousness around how Bonham recorded When the Levee
Hmm.
Breaks, and it was in a
Hmm.
stairwell in a
Hmm.
house where they were
Hmm.
recording to get like the right sound. And I can remember being at camp, 12 years old, and I was in Maine near Montreal, right on the border of Canada, and my camp counselor put in Led Zeppelin 4, and it changed my life forever. And I can't even, but when it got to Levy and I
Yeah.
heard that, so I'm poking around on Zepparella's music and I'm going through it and I'm like, okay, I want to see
Hmm.
how Clem does Levy and I want to see how she does Moby Dick. And you crushed them. It was like,
Oh,
those are not easy to duplicate that sound, Clem. And so, look, I probably would have, I would have wanted to talk to you either way, but like just the fact, you did such a great job, and it seems.
thank you. Oh, that means so
So,
much to me. That means so much. Yeah, Levy is definitely a favorite. It's definitely a favorite.
well, I
Yeah.
hope to have an opportunity to hear it live sometime in
I hope
person. If you ever
so.
get
I
up
hope
to
so.
Boston,
We do
um,
sometimes. We get to the Cape, I would
um,
really like to get back to Boston. We have so many fans there. I'd like to get back there. Yeah.
well, we'll keep in touch, and
Good.
I will. I can't thank you enough. This has been awesome.
It's been so awesome. Thank you so much, Greg. I
You are
just
very
really,
welcome.
can't imagine more fun, really.
Well,
So thank you.
good luck on tour. Good luck with your book, and good luck with your spiritual healing. And who knows, I may be reaching out to you. Clem, my car broke down and I'm on the street and I need some help right now. I'm in the middle of traffic.
Take a breath. Take a breath. Take a breath. Bring in the bear. What does the bear say?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I can see it, I can just see it coming from you. So, awesome. Well, have a wonderful weekend, and
You too.
and I'll talk to you again really soon.
Let your daddy see. Drop down, mama. Dream of me. Mama, allow me. I'll fool around all night long. Well, I'm maybe crazy, baby, but I sure know right from wrong. I sure know right from wrong. Well, I sure know right from wrong. I sure know right from wrong. Drop down, baby. Let your daddy see. Drop down, mama. Dream of me, yeah. Mama, allow me.
Thanks again for listening to this episode, my interview with Clementine Moss. Remember, you can pick up a copy of Clem's book, From Bonham to Buddha and Back, The Slow Enlightenment of the Hard Rock Drummer, at the bookstore at albumreview.net, or you can go to clemthegreat.com. That's Clem with one M, thegreat.com. I had high hopes before this interview that it would go well, and I was blown away by just how brilliant Clem is. Not only was she honest at times and showed her emotions, but her spirit is pure and her journey is focused. I just love when she talked about her struggles and how she overcame them. Look, we all have struggles in life, right, guys? Hell, I struggle pretty much every day, but I think after talking to Clem, this was just another example of what it feels like to not be alone. That there are others out there who struggle as well, and we can all get through it. We just got to keep fighting. So if you're interested in any of the books or albums that I've discussed in this episode or previous episodes, go to albumreview.net and pick up a copy of your own. Listen to all my podcast album reviews at albumreview.net by clicking on the podcast tab. They can also be heard wherever podcasts are available. Please follow the show on your preferred platform so you can get regular updates on new episodes. Also, if you guys would be so kind as to pop a quick review or rate the podcast, that helps move the needle and get the word out there. I do want to hear from you. Please email me your feedback, album review requests. I always get tripped up on that one. Album review requests. I'm always like album review requests. I sound like Elmer Fudd. And any other questions you might have to gpotters@albumreview.net. That's GPOTTERS at albumreview.net. If you'd like to get regular updates on reviews, interviews, products, and music news, go to the homepage and join the mailing list. Visit our YouTube page and stay tuned for updates on Instagram, Facebook, and the almighty TikTok. You can find me at albumreview.net. All right, guys, take it easy. Be well.
Take a trip down by the highway. 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 Take a trip down